We can't outsmart what we don't understand, and that's why the very first and smartest step when dealing with toxic people is to recognize the pattern. Because toxic people are not random. They don't operate in chaos the way it looks from the outside. What they do is actually very predictable. Once you learn to see it, you'll notice the same cycle repeating itself over and over again. The moment you start noticing something powerful happens, you stop being surprised by it. And when you're no longer surprised, you're no longer thrown off balance. You start to realize, oh, this isn't about me. This is just how they function. That awareness alone puts you back in the driver's seat. Here's how the pattern usually goes. First, they bait you. They know exactly which words, which tones, which situations will get under your skin. It could be a sly insult disguised as a joke. It could be a guilt trip that makes you feel like the bad guy for setting boundaries. Or it could be flat out criticism, delivered in a way that leaves you defensive before you even open your mouth. That's the bait. And they're good at it because they've had practice, sometimes years of practice, pulling the same strings with the same people. The next step is the trigger. Once they've dangled the bait, they wait for your reaction. The roll of your eyes, the sharpness in your tone, the sigh that says you're fed up, they feed on it. Because to them, your emotional reaction is proof that they have influence over you. And influence, even negative influence, equals power. It keeps the spotlight on them, keeps the energy centered around them. Then comes the blame. This is where they twist things. Somehow, even when they were the one who started the fire, you end up being the one holding the bucket of water and accused of spilling it. You walk away questioning yourself, wondering if maybe you really were too sensitive or too harsh or too difficult. That's not an accident. That's the loop they want you stuck in. Because if you're doubting yourself, you're not questioning them. And then here's the kicker, they repeat. It doesn't stop after one round. It becomes a cycle. Bait, trigger, blame, repeat over and over, day after day, conversation after conversation. And if you're not aware of it, you keep playing along without realizing it's the same script. You argue harder, you explain longer, you justify yourself deeper. And every time you walk away more drained and more frustrated than before. But when you start recognizing this pattern, everything shifts. Think of it like a magician's trick. As long as you don't know how the trick works, you're amazed, you're shocked, you're thrown off. But the second you see what's happening behind the curtain, the magic loses its power. The same is true here. When you see that their behavior isn't personal, it's a pattern, they stop having the same hold on you. Now let me give you a real life example, because this isn't just theory. Imagine a coworker who always makes backhanded comments about your work. Wow, you actually finished that project on time? Didn't think you had it in you. That's the bait. You feel the rise in your chest, the heat in your face, and you're tempted to snap back or defend yourself. That's the trigger. If you take it, you fire back, and now you're in an argument over whether they were joking or serious. They'll shrug and say, geez, you're so sensitive. Can't you take a joke? That's the blame. And a week later, the same coworker makes another little jab. That's the repeat. But if you've trained yourself to see the pattern, your perspective changes. Instead of thinking, why are they doing this to me? You think, there it is again. That's their bait. And when you label it in your head as bait, you rob it of its power. It's like fishing. If you see the hook under the worm, you're not going to bite. And that's the beginning of freedom. Recognizing the pattern doesn't mean excusing it. It doesn't mean saying, oh well, that's just how they are. It means you're putting language to what's happening so you don't get caught in the same emotional traps. It means you're stepping back enough to observe instead of react. And the beauty of this is that you can apply it anywhere. To family members who guilt trip, to friends who stir drama, to bosses who manipulate. The characters may be different, but the script is the same. Here's the deeper truth: toxic people thrive in confusion. If you're confused, they're in control. But patterns create clarity, and clarity is power. When you can name the pattern, you can claim your response. You move from being the player in their game to being the referee. You're not just reacting, you're choosing. And every time you choose differently, you weaken the cycle a little more. So the first and smartest move isn't to fight them, and it isn't to fix them. It's to see them clearly, to step back and say, I know this dance and I don't have to join it anymore. Because once you recognize the pattern, you're no longer a prisoner of it. You're free to respond, free to protect your peace, and free to break the cycle they've been running on repeat. That's the power of awareness. It turns manipulation into something predictable, and what's predictable can be managed. If you've ever dealt with a toxic person, you know the tug of war that happens inside of you. They say something that cuts deep, and instantly you feel that surge of heat in your chest, your pulse quickens, and you want to fire back. You want to defend yourself, explain, prove them wrong, or sometimes just shut them down with something sharp of your own. That's the instinct. But here's where we lose so much power the second we react on impulse. We hand over control of the entire interaction Toxic people thrive on reactions, and the more reactive you are, the more influence they gain. Controlling your reactions isn't about being passive, it's about being powerful. It's not about letting them win, it's about keeping your peace. The truth is, they don't need your agreement to feel like they've won. They only need your attention. If they can get you angry, if they can make you yell, if they can push you into explaining yourself for the 10th time, they've already succeeded. Because now the conversation is no longer about the truth, it's about your reaction. And the more emotional you become, the easier it is for them to paint you as the problem. That's how they spin it. That's how they keep the spotlight off of themselves and onto you. But when you learn to control your reactions, the entire dynamic changes. Think of it this way, toxic people are like storm chasers. They go looking for thunder and lightning. If you give them calm skies instead, they don't know what to do with it. Imagine someone throwing insults your way, expecting you to explode, and instead, you answer with composure. Not sarcasm, not coldness, just calm clarity. You can almost see the frustration in their eyes because their plan didn't work. And let's be honest, controlling your reactions doesn't happen overnight. It takes practice and it takes discipline. The natural response is always to defend or attack back. But the smarter response is to pause. Just a pause, one deep breath, one slow exhale creates a gap. And in that gap, you get to decide instead of just react. That's where your strength lives, not in how loud you speak, but in how deliberate you are. Let me give you a picture of this. Say you're at a family gathering and that one relative, you know the one, makes a jab about your choices. So, still at that job? Thought you'd have moved on by now? The bait is right there. Everything you wants to fire back, list your accomplishments, explain why your decisions make sense. But imagine if instead you smile slightly and say, I'm doing exactly what I need to be doing right now. Calm, collected, no defensiveness. The conversation ends before it even begins. Why? Because you didn't give them what they wanted. You didn't hand over your peace just to win a point. Controlling your reactions is really about choosing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Not everything deserves a response. Not every attack requires a defense. Sometimes the smartest answer is silence. Not because you're weak, but because silence can be louder than words. Silence communicates, I won't be dragged into your chaos. Silence is control. And here's the irony, toxic people often mistake silence for weakness until they realize you're not bending, not breaking, and not feeding into the cycle. That's when silence becomes strength. And I know some of you are thinking, but if I don't react, aren't they getting away with it? That's the trap toxic people want you to believe. They want you to think that unless you fight, they've won. But real winning isn't about proving them wrong. It's about not letting them dictate how you feel. Winning isn't when they stop being toxic. Winning is when you stop being affected. Now here's the challenge, controlling your reactions doesn't just happen in the big, obvious moments. It's in the small ones too. The little digs, the eye rolls, the passive-aggressive comments. Every one of those is a test. And every time you respond with calm instead of chaos, you're training yourself, you're building a muscle. Just like going to the gym, the more you practice, the stronger you get. Over time, it becomes second nature. Another layer to this is tone. Sometimes it's not about what you say, but how you say it. Toxic people will twist your words if you give them the chance, but they can't twist your calm. If your tone is steady, your face relaxed, your body language unshaken, you communicate something far louder than words. You don't control me. And that message, without a single argument, is powerful. There's also freedom in understanding this. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Just because someone sends you an invitation with their words doesn't mean you have to show up with yours. Controlling your reaction is declining the invitation. It's saying, I see what you're trying to do, and I choose not to play along. That is where real maturity and real wisdom show up. Think about the times you've lost your cool with a toxic person. You probably walked away exhausted, replaying everything in your head, thinking of what you should have said differently. But think about the opposite. Imagine walking away calm, steady, unshaken. That's a victory you carry with you. That's a story you replay not with regret, but with pride. Because you'll know, you didn't just survive the interaction, you mastered it. At the end of the day, toxic people may never stop being toxic. But you can stop being their puppet, and that's what controlling your reactions does. It cuts the strings. It tells them, you can act however you want, but you don't get to control me. That is the smartest power you can hold. And it's not about being louder, sharper, or quicker. It's about being calmer, wiser, and stronger. Because real strength doesn't come from unleashing every emotion you feel. Real strength comes from holding your peace, no matter what storm they bring. Boundaries are one of the most misunderstood tools we have when it comes to dealing with toxic people. Some people think boundaries are walls, big, cold, immovable barriers that push everyone away. But that's not what a boundary really is. A boundary is more like a door with a lock. It's not meant to keep everyone out. It's meant to give you control over who gets access and when. You hold the key, you decide when to open, when to close, and when to keep it locked. And the smartest way to deal with toxic people is to learn how to use that lock with confidence, without apology. Here's why this matters. Toxic people don't naturally respect limits. If you don't draw the line, they'll draw it for you, and they'll always draw it in their favor. They'll take as much space as you give them. They'll take your time, your patience, your energy until you feel like you're running on empty. That's what happens when there are no boundaries. You end up drained, resentful, and wondering why every interaction feels like a loss. Boundaries prevent that. Boundaries say, here's where you end, and here's where I begin. It's a clear definition of what's acceptable and what isn't. Now, let me be honest. Setting boundaries is uncomfortable at first, especially if you're not used to it. You'll worry about being rude, about sounding harsh, about making the situation worse. Toxic people will play into that. They'll accuse you of being cold, distant, selfish, and if you're not prepared, you'll feel guilty and start lowering the line you just drew. But here's the truth. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their reaction to your boundary is proof that the boundary was necessary in the first place. Healthy people respect limits. Toxic people resist them. That resistance tells you everything you need to know. Think about it like this. If your neighbor came into your house uninvited, rummaging through your fridge, sitting on your couch, changing the channel, you wouldn't hesitate to say, "Hold on, you don't live here." You wouldn't apologize for locking your door after they left. You wouldn't feel bad about saying, "This is my space." But when it comes to our emotional and mental space, we hesitate. We let people barge in with their negativity, their manipulation, their drama, and then we wonder why we feel violated. The principle is the same. You need locks on your emotional doors just as much as your physical ones. Here's what a boundary can sound like. It can be as simple as, "I'm not going to discuss this with you." Or, "If you continue raising your voice, I'm ending this conversation." Or even, "I can't take this call right now, but I'll respond when I'm ready." Notice something about each of those. They're not about controlling the other person. They're about controlling you. You can't force someone to change, but you can control how much access they have to you. That's the power of a boundary. And it doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. In fact, the best boundaries are calm and consistent. Think about a fence. If you have to shout every day, "Stay out of my yard," the fence isn't doing its job. But when the fence is clear, visible, and strong, people don't even try to cross it. That's what your boundaries should feel like. Clear enough that people know where they are, consistent enough that you don't have to explain them over and over, and firm enough that people eventually stop testing them. Let me give you an example. Maybe you have a friend who constantly calls you at all hours, dumping their problems on you, never asking how you're doing. At first, you answer every call because you don't want to seem unsupportive. But over time, you notice you dread their name showing up on your phone. You feel drained after every conversation. That's your signal that a boundary is needed. So instead of answering every call, you let it go to voicemail and call back later at a time that works for you. You might even tell them, "I care about you, but I can't always pick up right away. I'll call back when I can." That's not harsh, that's healthy. You're not rejecting them, you're directing your own time. Boundaries also mean consequences. Because a boundary without a consequence is just a suggestion. If you tell someone, "Don't raise your voice at me," and they keep yelling and you stay in the conversation, the boundary means nothing. But if you calmly say, "You keep yelling, I'm ending the call," and then you actually hang up when they do it, the message lands. Not because you fought, not because you yelled louder, but because you showed that your boundary has weight. And here's the most important part. Boundaries are not about changing the other person. They're about protecting you. Whether they respect the boundary or not is secondary. The real win is that you respected yourself enough to set it and stick to it. That self-respect builds confidence, and confidence changes the way you show up in every relationship, not just the toxic ones. So the next time you feel like someone is draining you, ask yourself, what boundary is missing here? What line haven't I drawn? What door have I left unlocked? Because once you lock it, once you make the boundary clear, you'll find yourself calmer, lighter, and more in control. You'll realize you don't have to fight toxic people at every turn. You just have to decide how much access they get. And sometimes the smartest access is none at all. Boundaries aren't barriers to love or connection. They're the very thing that makes healthy love and real connection possible. Because only when you're free to protect your peace can you give the best version of yourself to the people who deserve it. And toxic people, they'll either learn to respect your boundaries or they'll move on to someone else who doesn't have them. Either way, you win. Toxic people are masters at pulling you into games you never agreed to play. They thrive on drama, manipulation, and conflict, and they're constantly throwing bait to see if you'll bite. It might look like a sarcastic remark, a guilt trip, a passive-aggressive dig, or even an outright lie designed to provoke you. And the natural temptation is to fight back, to correct the record, to argue your way to victory. But here's the catch: the moment you engage, you've already lost. Because their game is not about truth, it's about control. Their game is not about resolving the issue, it's about keeping you entangled. And the smartest way to win a rigged game is simple: don't play. The trick toxic people use is subtle but effective. They pull you into conversations that have no finish line. No matter what you say, it won't be enough. If you explain, they'll twist it. If you defend yourself, they'll find a new angle. If you raise your voice, they'll call you the aggressive one. It's like trying to wrestle in quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. That's why engaging never works. They're not looking for resolution. They're looking for reaction. Think about a time you've been in one of these cycles. Maybe you said something perfectly reasonable and they responded with, "Wow, I guess you don't care about anyone but yourself." Suddenly you're scrambling to prove them wrong. "No, that's not what I meant. I do care. Let me explain." And just like that, you're on defense for something you didn't even do. That's the game. And once you're in it, they control the rules, they move the goalposts, and they make sure you never really win. The alternative is powerful. You don't have to pick up every piece they throw at you. You can let it drop. You can decide that their bait doesn't deserve your bite. Silence, a calm response, or even walking away sends a louder message than 100 explanations ever could. Because when you stop playing, the game collapses. A toxic person without an audience is like a performer on an empty stage. They lose the spotlight they crave. And let me be clear, choosing not to engage isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Weakness is giving someone control over your emotions, your time, and your energy. Wisdom is saying, "I see what you're trying to do, and I won't step into the trap." It takes more strength to hold your tongue than to unleash it. It takes more strength to walk away than to wrestle in circles. Strength isn't about volume, it's about restraint. Here's an image to keep in your head. Imagine someone tossing you a rope, daring you to tug. The second you pull back, you're locked in a tug of war. It doesn't matter how strong you are, you're still playing their game. But if you refuse to grab the rope at all, the tug of war never begins. They're left holding the rope alone, looking foolish. That's what happens when you stop engaging. You starve the game of its fuel. And yes, it's going to feel unnatural at first. You'll feel the itch to correct them, to defend yourself, to make them see the truth. But ask yourself, when has that ever worked with someone toxic? How many times have you walked away from those arguments thinking, "I really proved my point"? Rarely, if ever. More often, you walk away drained, doubting yourself, and frustrated that the same issue will come up again tomorrow. That cycle ends when you stop stepping onto the board. Practical example, say you're dealing with a coworker who constantly tries to undermine you in meetings. They make snide comments like, "Well, we all know how long your projects usually take." The old you jumps in, defends yourself, lists deadlines, and argues back. The smarter you smiles calmly and says nothing, or simply says, "Noted," and continues. By not engaging, you've sent a signal, "I don't play that game." And over time, they realize they can't pull you in the way they used to. The beauty of refusing to engage is that it shifts the burden back where it belongs. Toxic people hate silence because it leaves them with their own words. Without your reaction to twist, they're left exposed. And often, that exposure is enough to make them uncomfortable. You don't have to fight to reveal the truth. Sometimes the truth reveals itself when you stop feeding the lie. Of course, not engaging doesn't mean ignoring every situation. It doesn't mean tolerating abuse or pretending everything is fine. It means being strategic. You choose what deserves your response. You choose what gets your energy. If a conversation can be solved with clarity, engage. If it's a trap designed to drain you, disengage. That's wisdom. That's control. And here's the freedom in this. You no longer have to carry the weight of every toxic comment, every manipulative game. You realize you have a choice. You don't have to play tug of war. You don't have to wrestle in quicksand. You don't have to attend every drama you're invited to. You can walk away with your peace intact. That's not losing. That's winning smarter. So the next time someone tries to pull you into their chaos, take a pause. Ask yourself, is this a conversation that can be solved, or is this just another game? If it's a game, smile, step back, and leave the rope on the ground. Because the smartest way to beat a toxic game isn't to play harder, it's to stop playing altogether. One of the most valuable resources you have isn't your money, your time, or even your knowledge, it's your energy. Because your energy dictates how you show up in every part of your life. If your energy is drained, your patience is shorter, your thinking is cloudier, your resilience is weaker. And toxic people know how to drain that energy like it's a sport. They take and take until you feel like you're running on fumes. That's why protecting your energy isn't optional, it's essential. Without it, you're running through life exhausted, reacting instead of choosing, surviving instead of living. Here's the hard truth: you are the gatekeeper of your energy. Nobody else is going to protect it for you. Toxic people will not wake up one morning and suddenly say, "You know what, I should stop draining them." That's not how they operate. If you leave the door open, they'll keep walking in. If you hand out access freely, they'll keep taking. Protecting your energy means recognizing that your peace is your responsibility. It's not a gift someone else can give you, it's a choice you make every single day. So what does it actually look like to protect your energy? Sometimes it's as simple as choosing not to argue, because arguments are expensive. They cost you mental clarity, emotional stability, and sometimes even physical energy. Every time you get hooked into defending yourself against a toxic attack, you're spending energy that could have gone into something that truly matters. Your work, your goals, your relationships with people who actually care about you. Protecting your energy means asking yourself, is this conversation worth the cost? If the answer is no, you save your breath and you walk away. Other times, protecting your energy looks like limiting your access. That could mean not answering every phone call, not replying to every text, not saying yes to every request. And I know for some of you that feels uncomfortable. You've been trained to think that saying no makes you selfish, that declining an invitation makes you rude, that stepping back makes you cold. But here's the reality: saying no to what drains you is what allows you to say yes to what sustains you. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's wise. Because you cannot pour into anyone else if you're constantly empty yourself. Think of your energy like a bank account. Every interaction is a transaction. Some people deposit into that account. They encourage you, they respect your boundaries, they support your growth. Others, they withdraw. They criticize, manipulate, guilt trip, or drain. If you don't watch the balance, one day you wake up overdrawn, exhausted, and resentful. Protecting your energy means paying attention to who's depositing and who's withdrawing, and making sure the account stays in the positive. And protecting your energy doesn't always mean cutting people off. Sometimes it means adjusting how much access they get. Maybe you limit conversations with a toxic coworker to only what's necessary for the job. Maybe you reduce time spent with a friend who only brings negativity into your life. Maybe you learn to keep certain topics off the table with a family member who always turns them into arguments. You don't always need to burn bridges, you just need to control how often you cross them. Here's something else to remember. Toxic people are skilled at disguising themselves as your responsibility. They'll make you feel guilty for stepping back. They'll say things like, I guess you don't care about me anymore, or, wow, you've changed. And the old version of you might feel pulled back in, trying to prove your loyalty. But protecting your energy means recognizing manipulation for what it is and refusing to play along. Their opinion of your choices does not override your right to peace. Picture it this way. Imagine you're holding a phone with limited battery. Every app you leave open drains that battery. Some apps are useful, they help you work, connect, or relax, but some are just running in the background, sucking the life out of your phone for no reason. Toxic people are those background apps. Protecting your energy means closing them down, not because you hate them, but because you want your phone, yourself, to last longer and run better. And don't underestimate how much your environment affects your energy too. Sometimes it's not just about who you're around, but where you put yourself. Are you constantly in places, conversations, or situations that drain you? Protecting your energy might mean stepping out of certain environments altogether. Toxicity isn't always a person, it can be a pattern, a place, or a routine. Now, I'll be real with you. Protecting your energy takes courage. Because the second you start doing it, you'll face pushback. Toxic people don't like losing access to your emotional resources. They'll push harder, they'll test boundaries, they'll guilt you. But every time you stay firm, you send a clear message: my peace is not up for negotiation. And once you build that consistency, even toxic people eventually learn that you're not the easy target you used to be. The reward: freedom. Freedom from constantly feeling drained. Freedom from carrying other people's chaos. Freedom to focus on the things, the people, and the goals that actually make your life better. Protecting your energy gives you room to breathe again, to think clearly, to live with intention instead of reaction. And that kind of freedom is priceless. So don't underestimate the value of your energy. Don't give it away to every argument, every manipulation, every toxic pull. Guard it the way you'd guard your most valuable asset, because it is. Protect it with boundaries, protect it with wisdom, protect it with courage. Because at the end of the day, toxic people may not change, but you don't have to let them change you. Your energy is yours. Keep it that way. There comes a point where the smartest, strongest, and most self-respecting thing you can do with a toxic person is simply walk away. Not argue more, not explain harder, not wait for them to finally see the damage they're doing, just walk away. And I know that sounds so final, maybe even impossible, especially when the toxic person is someone you love, someone in your family, or someone you've invested years of your life in. But here's the truth: walking away doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you've decided your peace, your sanity, and your future are more important than staying chained to a cycle that keeps wounding you. We live in a culture that tells us endurance is the measure of love, that if you really care, you'll just keep forgiving, keep enduring, keep tolerating. But endurance without boundaries is not love, it's self-abandonment. You cannot rescue a person who refuses to see their own behavior. You cannot fix someone who doesn't think they're broken. And you cannot spend your entire life sacrificing your well-being for someone who has no interest in changing. Walking away is not about giving up on them. It's about choosing not to give up on yourself. Think about it this way. If you're holding a rope in a tug of war and your hands are blistered, bleeding, and raw, the longer you hold on, the more damage you cause yourself. Walking away doesn't mean the other side won. It means you chose to stop letting pain define you. The toxic person may keep tugging at that rope, but when you drop it, they lose the power to pull you around. Walking away is you saying, "I'm done being dragged." And walking away doesn't always mean cutting someone completely out of your life. Sometimes it does, sometimes that's the only way. But other times, it's about emotional walking away. You stop trying to win their approval. You stop trying to change their perspective. You stop giving them the power to control your mood, your choices, or your sense of self. You can still be physically present in a room with them, but internally, you've unplugged from their chaos. You've stopped feeding the dynamic that drains you. The challenge is that toxic people are experts at keeping you hooked. They'll guilt you with phrases like, "After everything I've done for you," or "You're really gonna walk away from me?" They'll use pity, anger, manipulation, whatever they can to keep you engaged. But here's the thing, someone who truly loves you will never weaponize your compassion against you. Someone who respects you won't make you feel guilty for protecting your own well-being. Walking away means seeing manipulation for what it is and refusing to play the game. And yes, walking away can be lonely at first. It can feel like you're abandoning the familiar. Even if the familiar was toxic, you might question yourself. You might even miss the person because toxic relationships often run on cycles, highs and lows, drama and calm. It's addictive. That's why people stay. But if you give yourself time, you'll realize that the loneliness of walking away is far lighter than the exhaustion of staying. Over time, that loneliness gets replaced with peace, with clarity, with freedom. Let me tell you something powerful. The relationships you lose by walking away from toxicity are not real losses. They're openings. They're space for healthier connections, for relationships that lift you up instead of tearing you down, for people who value your energy instead of draining it. Every time you walk away from what doesn't serve you, you create room for what does. And the kind of peace you gain, that's not something any toxic person could ever provide. Walking away is also an act of leadership over your own life. It's the moment you stop letting other people's dysfunction dictate your direction. It's the moment you step into responsibility for your own happiness. Because here's the truth, nobody else is going to prioritize your peace for you. If you don't, nobody will. Walking away is you drawing the line in the sand and saying, "My life will not be defined by this chaos anymore. Now, will it always be easy?" No, sometimes you'll second guess yourself. Sometimes you'll wonder if you could have done more. But let me ask you, how much more have you already done? How many nights have you lost sleep? How many arguments have you replayed in your head? How much energy have you wasted hoping they'll finally change? Walking away isn't a sudden decision. It's usually the final step after you've already tried everything else. And once you take it, you'll see just how heavy the burden was that you were carrying. And here's the beautiful thing, walking away doesn't close your heart. It doesn't make you bitter. It doesn't mean you can't still care about that person from a distance. What it does is protect your ability to love, to trust, to connect with people who actually deserve a place in your life. It gives you the freedom to redirect your energy toward people and passions that build you up instead of breaking you down. So if you're standing at that crossroad right now, wondering if it's time to walk away, let me say this, you already know. Deep down, you know when a relationship is more harm than help. You know when someone's presence is costing you your peace. You know when the cycle will never change. The question isn't whether you know, the question is whether you're ready to act on what you know. Walking away isn't failure, it's wisdom, it's courage. It's the ultimate act of self-respect. And when you make that choice, you're not just closing a chapter, you're opening a whole new book, one where you are no longer the victim of someone else's toxicity, but the author of your own peace. So when it comes down to it, dealing with toxic people isn't about outsmarting them, fixing them, or proving anything to them. It's about protecting yourself. It's about choosing peace over conflict, clarity over chaos, and self-respect over endless battles. We started with the most important step, recognizing toxicity for what it is. Because until you name it, you can't fight it. Then we learned how to detach, how to set boundaries that aren't just words, but actions, how to protect your energy so you're not constantly drained, and how to know when it's time to step back and finally walk away. Each of these steps is about one thing, taking back control, because toxic people thrive when they can control your reactions, your emotions, your decisions. The moment you stop giving them that control, you win. You win by staying calm when they try to bait you, You win by refusing to get pulled into their drama. You win by drawing lines that protect your peace. And most of all, you win by refusing to let their behavior shape who you are. The smartest way to deal with toxic people isn't about changing them. It's about changing how you respond to them. And when you do that, you step out of their storm and into your own strength. That's where your freedom lives. That's where your peace begins. And that's how you make sure their toxicity never becomes your identity. So the next time a toxic person crosses your path, remember this: you don't have to fight harder, you just have to stand wiser. Protect your peace, guard your energy, and never be afraid to walk away. Because your life is too valuable, your future is too important, and your soul is too precious to waste it in someone else's storm.